Well, I put out 7,000 pages of top secret material to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I didn't give all of that to the newspapers, actually. I withheld part of that having to do with negotiations because I didn't want them to use that release of the negotiations as an excuse for breaking off negotiations, which really weren't real negotiations by Nixon at that time. They were ultimatums. They were sort of
Mm-hmm.
accept our terms or we'll blow you off the map, not
Mm-hmm.
real negotiations. But I did withhold those. I gave about 4,000 pages or so about to the New York Times, and when they were enjoined for the first time in our history, prevented from publishing a prior restraint, I gave them to the Washington Post. And then when they were enjoined to eventually 17 other newspapers, two more were enjoined. The First Amendment is often thought of, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, by the way, is often thought of as intended in particular to avoid prior restraint. In other words, to keep any publisher from publishing anything. And Julian Assange, to go right to the present, is not a source, as I was, of information. He was a publisher. Indicting him, as he is now indicted, is equivalent to having indicted the New York Times back in 1971, who published, and the 18 other newspapers who published. Now, actually, although it's little known, Nixon did have that in mind. He had a Boston grand jury operating to indict Neil Sheehan, Hedrick Smith, and the New York Times itself. And that was dropped largely. We don't really know entirely why that grand jury was dropped. So that would have provided a precedent for Julian Assange's indictment. As it is, there is no precedent. No other publisher has ever actually been indicted. And that would pretty much finish the First Amendment if he were convicted and that were upheld, for publishing material that the public had a need to know, that was classified, but that clearly did not require protection from any foreign enemy or ally or anybody else, anyone except the American public. It was most classified material is protected from the American voters, from the American public, from the American Congress, not from any foreign enemy. In fact, a great deal of it involves threats, as Nixon was making at that very time to North Vietnam, that are very well known to the recipient of the threat. North Vietnam at that time, their allies, Russia and China, knew of those threats. It was only the American public from whom that was very secret, because they would have objected in 1969 and 70 and 71 to threats and commitments and readiness to enlarging the Vietnam War.